Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will have more students join in, so we'll let them in as soon as we see them. But to respect everyone's time, we'll get started. We have a lot to cover. And welcome. Thank you for joining us in the virtual world. My name is Ivy Siegel Mack. I am from the Campus Life office. We put on our life skills series monthly, weekly. In the fall, you'll see a lot more. This particular series is sponsored by Hillel. John is in that area. Wave hi, John. And so this is co-sponsored by Hillel. Our speaker is Jordan Niefeld. He is a CPA. The company he's from is Raymond James and Associates. He's going to speak to us about financial best practices. A couple reminders, if you could keep yourself mute, but we do encourage your video on if you feel comfortable, just so we can get to know you better. If not, that's fine too. We know there's a lot going on. This series is also being recorded, so just so you're aware. And afterwards, if you could please fill out, I will email you a survey. We appreciate your feedback. And let me see if there's anything else. I think we are all set. And also it's going to be interactive, so at any time just put your questions in the chat and we will try and pause every now and then and try and get to most of you. So thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us and being a part of our event.
Fantastic. Ivy, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Good to go. First of all, welcome. Ivy, thank you very much for helping put this together. Big shout out to John and Hillel for all the great things that they're doing. If you haven't had the chance to check out Hillel, reach out to John. It's a fantastic Jewish organization on campus. And so I want to thank you for helping put this together. Another note, I want to thank everybody here for coming. You know, I am a product of Miami, born and raised my entire life. I've gone through many different, you know, educational programs throughout the school system, colleges, etc., but really haven't had a lot of time in my experience prior to, you know, devoting my life to it, to learning about financial matters and best financial practices. So I'm really happy everyone, you know, is able to get on this call today, and I hope it's going to be not only informative, but I hope to hopefully inspire you to ultimately follow your dreams and follow your passion. So let's just get started. If you have any questions, feel free to just pop them on in the Zoom chat there. If I can't get to anyone's question today, you're gonna have my email. I'm more than happy to talk to you offline about any personal, private questions that you may have. Ultimately, I'm here for you guys and here to help in any way I possibly can, okay? So let's kind of start off and begin this journey together. What I'm going to do is talk to you about your why. So first of all, my background is, like I said, born and raised in North Miami Beach, ended up going to Arizona State University and just had no idea what I wanted to do with my life in terms of my career. Was really insecure in school, was trying to figure out, you know, meeting new people, and was really didn't know what I wanted to do. Ultimately, I decided to, you know, get involved in the business program there and started to originally work in marketing and learn the nuances of marketing and how to brand and, you know, showcase your abilities in sales. But from there, I ended up going into the accounting program here in Miami and became a CPA, and now am working with families and investors and you know, other business owners and helping them plan their finances and invest their finances and ultimately help them prepare themselves for their future. So the point I'm talking about and really trying to highlight here is, you know, I didn't know that ultimately I was going to be in this field when I was in my 30s. You know, I encourage everyone to, you know, try new things, and we're going to talk about that. Try new things, put yourself out there. You're never going to know where you ultimately are going to feel you're most passionate, you know, about, or where you're really going to enjoy, you know, working until you try different things. When I was in college, I absolutely despised accounting. Couldn't have told you that was the last thing I possibly could have gotten up out of bed and gone to accounting class. And I ended up becoming a CPA. And through that experience, I really challenged myself to try new things and see where it would take me. And ultimately, I'm really happy with how it turned out. So if you haven't had a chance, one thing I do recommend if you're, in college and trying to figure out, a lot of questions I get is, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know where I should be putting my time and energy. I know I want to be successful. I know I want to, live a really financially sound life and be able to afford and do all the things that I want to do. Travel, have a family, all the things. However, I don't know what to do. So one thing I would recommend if you haven't had the chance is to pick up this book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And I'm not going to go into it in full, but this book really helped me kind of showcase and understand what my why was. He talks about it's not what you do or how you do it, but why you do what you do. And that's ultimately why people join your cause, join your business, want to work with you and help propel you to get to the next level. So I really would recommend you picking up this book and giving it a shot over the summer. I spend a lot of time going around and giving back to the community, whether it's with FIU, different professional organizations, or even some of the inner cities, schools in Miami. And I think it's very important that as you progress through your career, that you're always giving back to those around you. And that's really one of the reasons why I'm here today. I wanted to make sure that I'm giving back to you guys and hopefully, again, giving you guys some informative, helpful education for some of the questions that I had when I was, your age and trying to figure out, what I should be doing with my money and how to ultimately put myself, in the best possible position. So let's just start with this little video because I think it really highlights a lot.
Like there's a redemptive power that making a choice has, rather than feeling like you're at effect to all the things that are happening. Make a choice, right? You just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, how you're going to do it. Just decide. And then from that point, the universe is going to get out your way. It's like it's water. It wants to move and go around stuff, So for me, I want to represent possibilities. I want to represent the idea that you really can make what you want. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. And I just believe that. I believe that I can create whatever I want to create. If I can put my head on it right, study it, learn the patterns, and it's hard to put into words, it's real metaphysical, esoteric nonsense. But I feel very strongly that we are who we choose to be.
So obviously that's Will Smith, one of the legends in Hollywood and just a phenomenal actor. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to some of his interviews, I really highly recommend it because he's quite inspiring. But watching that, and I like to watch that every now and again because it really does, underscore what making a choice in your life will do for you. Like I said, all of us ultimately want to be successful. We want to pursue our education. We want to, either own a business or be a professional or, do good things in the world, right? But you have to be able to, and this is something that I learned, start somewhere. And by giving yourself the ability to start somewhere and making a choice somewhere, that's how you're ultimately going to realize and learn what you want to do. And if I hadn't started in, some of the internships that I did, learning what I liked, learning what I didn't like, ultimately trying out the marketing world and seeing how I fit in that environment and industry, it wouldn't have led me here to where I am today. So I think making a choice, giving yourself the option and ability to try new things, put yourself in that, uncomfortable position. That's how you're ultimately going to learn who you are and where you're ultimately going to be the most successful. Now, when I talk to my clients about, personal wealth and helping them organize their finances, and I work with all different types of people, whether they're, up and coming millennials who have real businesses and are starting to produce, significant cash flow. I have, individuals who are married and have young children and need to start planning for college. I have individuals who are, working in successful businesses and need help managing the profits that they have, all the way down to retirees, mom and dads, grandmas and grandpas who are retired and now have built up their savings and need to figure out how they're going to make sure their savings will last them throughout the entirety of their lives. So what I talk to, young people about specifically is this idea of 4 buckets of personal wealth. And that's my way of saying, how do we organize how we're spending and saving our money? And what this example is showing you is to picture yourself having 4 buckets of savings, ultimately. With the first bucket, you're putting in your monthly operating expenses. Ideally, if you were to have a $50,000 salary, for example, the idea would be to try to keep at least 1 to 2 months of savings into that operating account to pay for your monthly needs, your monthly budgeting needs, right? Your rent, your car, your insurance, your food, whatever entertainment you may have, and to always to try to keep at least 1 to 2 months of expenses in that bucket, okay? And in this case, on a $50,000 salary, after taxes, of course, that comes out to about $80,000, okay? The next bucket would flow over to your savings bucket, and that's where we're really trying to keep between 3 and 6 months of savings. And this is what we're calling our reserve rainy day bucket fund, right? This is if there's an emergency, we need to make sure that we've planned out and have already, thought of where we're going to access, savings in case there's some sort of, real catastrophe. When people were laid off of work during COVID and they didn't have bucket 2 in order, it really caused a lot of pain. It really caused a lot of stress for these individuals. So before I work with families or anybody in terms of making sure that their investments are working, which we're going to talk about bucket 4, really want to make sure your bucket 1 and your bucket 2 are really in place. If you're not in place in bucket 1 and bucket 2, then you may not be ready for your bucket 3 and 4, which is your longer term investments, okay? So on a 3-month savings, on a monthly annual income, you're looking at about $12,000, right? On a $50,000 salary. These are, again, our goals. If you were to give yourself some goals, what can we work towards over the next 12, 18, 24 months? This is where you would want to start planning your financial positioning to be. Now, ultimately, bucket 4 is talking about investments. But before I go to bucket 4, let's talk about bucket 3. And that's being part of your long-term retirement. That's stuff like your IRA, your 401ks, right? Those long-term buckets that the IRS and that the government, allows us to be part of to help reduce our taxes today and to help build our future for tomorrow. And that's where we're getting a lot of some of the tax advantages, reducing our taxes now and allowing that money to grow into the market. So a lot of companies that you may be part of, they may offer some incentives, some benefits of being in those companies, like a 401k. And again, what's a 401k? A 401k is simply just a line item in the IRS code that talks about giving your employees the opportunity to save, okay? So it's really a business's way of giving a benefit to an employee like you and I to work for the business. Now, the benefit is, and the way that the government looks at it is they say, okay, Jordan, we're going to give you some of the tax breaks on the money that you put away into your retirement fund because ultimately we don't want to take care of you when you're older. So we're going to help you save on your taxes now. We're going to let that money grow into the market, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then ultimately, when you take the money out, the money has grown and compounded over time. and you'll pay taxes on it at that point. So everybody wins. So typically you want to look at bucket 1, 2, and 3. If you're a young person and are working, you know, you could put up to $6,000 in an IRA. That's if your company or your business doesn't offer any sort of retirement plan. But if you work for a business and they're offering you some sort of 401k savings plan, I highly recommend you take advantage of it. A lot of them will match whatever you put into the plan up to a certain percentage point. I work with a lot of different businesses and helping them set up these plans. So you always want to make sure you're taking advantage of that. That's significant money that you will be able to grow over time if you start early. And a lot of this conversation today, I'm also going to talk about the benefits of starting early and why, as young people, the earlier you start, the better you're going to be for yourself. Okay? Ultimately, bucket 4 is talking about, once we've, you know, talked and done all the steps for bucket 1, 2, and 3, our operating's in good order. We have a savings account for our emergency funds. We've really taken advantage of any retirement, you know, tax advantages that we can be part of. Now we may have some extra money on the side to start looking into, you know, current market and current investment opportunities, you know, where we can make sure our money's growing over time. And I'll talk to you about a couple ideas where, if I was a young person today and getting started, where would I start with, you know, $500 or $600 or $700 as I begin to build my portfolio, okay? But before we do that, you know, we in this country, you know, myself included, and especially our generation, we are spenders, you know. And I just love this meme, you know, when I saw this, seeing this guy, you know, look at savings as it's a good thing to save. You know, a lot of the money that we're going to spend today and not reinvest in ourselves is really going to hurt us for the long term. But only you can control that. You know, only you can control what you're putting your money into. You know, are you putting your money into yourself with appreciating assets, right? Investments like stocks and bonds or real estate, or things that can ultimately make you money and make your family money later on? Or are you spending on items that are not going to, you know, appreciate in value and are actually going to go the opposite way, like clothes or jewelry or cars or whatever, for the most part, right? So it's good to save. It's cool to save. It's a good thing to get your buckets in order like we had here. That's really where you want to begin moving towards. Now, you know, you will see credit card opportunities because they're everywhere. And, you know, these companies make money ultimately when you're not paying back, right? They're in business, you know, ultimately to provide credit to us as consumers. And when we're not paying our credit cards back, they're making money for their shareholders, right? So building credit is a very important tool. Building healthy credit is a very good thing. But if you're building credit and you're not paying that credit back, you're going to fall into a whole lot of trouble. And as young people, we can really, you know, be on the forefront of making sure that we're paying back all of our expenses through our credit and not allowing it to accumulate to levels which will sink us over time. You know, avoiding the interest and extra expenses by paying your credit card balance off in full every month. You know, typically, if you can't pay it back that month, you shouldn't be buying what you're looking at. You know, that's the ultimate hard talk that you have to have with yourself to understand. I've dealt with individuals who have, you know, built up significant credit card debt over time, and it's really put them on the back burner of having them accomplish their financial goals. And ultimately, this is what all of this is about, right? Making sure that we're going to school, we're getting a good education, we're going to find out what we're passionate about, where we could add the most value in the marketplace, right? Make a good living, have the things that we want, live in good health, and have a great life. But there's going to be temptations along the way, i.e. credit cards and other things that are going to come to you, which if you don't take a real disciplined approach with, you're going to fall behind. And it's going to be very difficult for you to break, to dig yourself out of that. And here's just a quick example of what good, bad credit looks like, where, even if you have good credit and you're someone who is paying back your monthly or, credit card bills, right? If you don't have, good credit history, these interest rates continue to go up. So on a purchase of $1,000 at a rate of 7%, years to pay off, 12 years of interest, $440, the actual cost of that item. And that's with semi-good interest, right? Gets the people with bad interest and bad credit where you can get up into these real high double-digit numbers. And, you're turning a $1,000 purchase into a $3,300 purchase. That's not particularly a good deal. I think we can all agree. So really being clear with yourself and understanding that keeping credit, in good order is really important. And saving is very, very important.
There's a good question. Sorry to interrupt. There's a good question in the chat. I don't know, before you switch over, I wanted to hop in with it.
Please.
Someone said, when's the best time to get a credit card? People say you should apply for one now so you can build credit, right? You need credit to get credit sort of mentality. When do you suggest that?
I mean, ultimately, what are we using the credit? I would say, a couple questions. What are we using the credit for? Do we have a job? Do we anticipate being able to pay that credit off on a monthly basis? If the idea is, okay, should I get a credit card and I'll buy some things and I'll pay it off in 8 months? My question to you would be no. Our generation, myself included, we've been brought up into this idea where we want it now. And if we don't have the cash for it, we're just going to put it on a credit card, a piece of plastic, and we'll deal with it later. Well, guess what? That's what gets us all in a lot of trouble. And why ultimately it takes some of us a lot longer to get to our financial goals than others. So if you think you have the cash flow in order to pay off that credit card by the end of the month, and I'm not talking about the minimum. I'm talking about if you're putting a $500 charge on your credit card, do you have the $500 to pay it off by the end of the month? If you don't, then consider paying in cash until you feel comfortable that you'll be able to pay it off at the end of the month. That would be my response. Don't saddle yourself with the anxiety and the stress of putting on debts that you can't repay, because ultimately it's going to come back to you at some point in time. And I assure you, if you start with a clean slate, you're going to be in a much better position than you would be if we had to clean this up later on. Okay? So moving on, again, this is just to highlight, what a $1,000 purchase would mean when you're saving, when you're not, putting and making the credit card companies rich by paying them your hard-earned money. And looking at what the actual cost of goods will be once you invest and take a long-term approach. $1,000 doesn't necessarily mean $1,000 coming out of your pocket if you're doing it the right way. It could be up to, over 3,000. It could be lower. So moving on here, we talk about the market and we talk about investing, and there's a lot of different ways to invest. You can invest in stocks, you can invest in bonds, you can have money market accounts, which are simply, leaving your money in short-term instruments, in cash. You invest in real estate and other items. Traditionally, the biggest wealth, generator over time since in our history has been the market. Now, that doesn't mean that you pick one stock and you become a day trader overnight, but it does mean that by taking a long-term approach, by diversifying your assets, by building for your future, and ultimately investing in U.S. business, right? Because that's what the stock market is. It's a collection of U.S. business and business markets all across the world, and being able to determine whether you want to be part of that business and the successes or failures of that business, right? So a stock essentially is ownership. This is the idea between ownership and loanership. Stock and a bond. So let's just talk about that very briefly. A stock is essentially owning a piece of the company, okay? A company like Coca-Cola will have X amount of shares, right? You'll be able to purchase one of those shares or several of those shares. As the company continues to earn profits, people will want to enter the marketplace and purchase those shares and demand those shares because the company is going up. Therefore, the price goes up. If the company is not selling Coca-Cola bottles and people are moving away from sugary drinks and they don't feel comfortable in the protection of what Coca-Cola can offer their consumers, then profits are going to drop. People are going to sell their stocks and the price will go down. So typically when I'm working with individuals, you want to diversify your stock ownership, right? You don't want to concentrate your stock ownership into one company. You want to be able to diversify your positioning. And I'm going to give you an example of what that diversification looks like and ultimately what the historical returns have been since the market has been in existence. Now, bonds are a little different. Bonds are a little different. Bonds are when you and I, right? You and I are investors, and companies are always looking to raise money. Let's go back to the example of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is looking to raise money because they want to come out with a new beverage that they believe, the young people are going to want. But they don't necessarily want to earn, they don't want to use their money. They want to use investors' money. So what they'll say is, okay, you and I, why don't you lend our money as investors to Coca-Cola, and we'll pay you an interest. Coca-Cola will pay you an interest, right? Pay us every 6 months. And at the end of the term of our contract, they'll give us back our principal again, right? So if it's a 5-year contract on a bond, pay us $50 every 6 months, $50, $50, $50 every 6 months. At the end of the term, they'll give us back our principal, which is usually $1,000 per bond. Now, if the stock goes up of Coca-Cola, right, that doesn't really affect us because we are on a fixed income. We're on a fixed bond instrument. So we're just getting our interest. Reversely, if the stock goes down and Coca-Cola is not able, to succeed with their stock in the short term, it doesn't really affect us either because we're on a fixed income stream. So people use bonds historically as a hedge against stocks. It's a balance. It's a balance between using your, growth orientation of what your equities will do versus your bonds. And then ultimately your money market, which is part of your cash bucket. So these are your 3 traditional buckets that investors are going to look at in their overall portfolio. And of course, you're going to add in other sleeves to your portfolio as you grow, as you build your wealth over time. And that's when real estate comes into the picture, right? That's where commodities might come into the picture, right? Different alternative investments may come into your picture so that you're building a well-rounded portfolio where stocks, where bonds and money markets are your big holdings. Of course, each one is diversified in its own way. And as the market continues to appreciate, when one zigs, the other will zag. And that typically is how you reduce, your risk overall. Now, I think it's important for us to understand, and we're living through a really, unprecedented time, to say the least, with COVID, that this country and the, marvelous, tailwind, as Warren Buffett would say, of United States business overall has endured many hardships in its past. and will endure many hardships in its future. Okay? But what you're looking at here is a snapshot since after World War II, right? Or through World War II, all the way to where we are now, all the different calamities and events that this country has been through, whether it was the attack on Pearl Harbor, presidential assassinations, we've had 9/11, we had the great financial crisis of '08, we've had, Brexit, of course, in 2016, and now we're having COVID-19. But what this shows you is that through it all, we've been able as a country and as a market to overcome. And that's why it's so important to be able to be invested and diversified in quality positions over the long term. Fear is always going to be part of investing, right? It's always going to be something that is always going to, be part of the conversation. It's something that we have to manage, right? Manage our risk, manage how much risk are we willing to give to get the returns that we desire, right? But if you take a long-term approach and you start early and you diversify your holdings as young people, you will be able to be successful. And what this is showing you is from 1940 all the way through the end of 19, a $10,000 investment, right? So you're looking at 80 years of market performance here in the top 500 companies in the United States, right? The S&P 500, which I'm going to give you a snapshot about. But that's simply just to show you the top 500. If we were to have a bucket, right, and we took in all the top 500 companies, right, and weighed them with, Microsoft and Apple being a little heavier weighted because they're so big, and some of the smaller companies are a little less weighted because they're small. But if we group them all together, you're looking at over a 10% return per year. Not too bad. Letting your money grow over time. Okay? And that's with all the calamities, all the challenges that the country has faced. So you have to understand the history in order to know where you're going to go in the future. And ultimately, time is on your side. Warren Buffett constantly talks about it's not timing the market, it's putting time in the market. The longer you put time into the market, the more returns you're going to have. Okay? And that's typically what history has showed you. Now, what this slide is talking about is saying, what if I, as an investor, put $1,000 per year starting at age 25, right? Let's say I'm 25 years old. I invest $1,000 a year up until I'm 65 years old. 25 to 65, that's 40 years times 1,000, it's $40,000. Allowing your money to grow in a diversified portfolio at a very reasonable 7% compounded, you're looking at $213,000 at the end of your tenure. Pretty significant. Now, what if we waited 10 years? What if we waited 10 years and said, you know what, I'm 25, I don't want to save right now. Any money I get, I'm going to spend it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go party here and do that and do this and whatever. And I start at 35, right? 35 to 65, 30 years at $1,000 a year. That 30,000 turns into 100,000. So what this slide shows you is the value of starting early, of why these early years, allowing our money to compound and grow, is so significant. And that's why I'm passionate about talking to you guys and just letting you know that, you can create the future that you want, but time is on your side. And even if it's $50 a month, even if it's $25 a month, even if it's $20 a month. There are ways to create savings for yourself where you can automatically have, we have automatic savings accounts, for example, where, $500 or $100 or whatever it is, will automatically transfer from your checking to your savings account. You could go to your bank literally and say, every month I want $25 to go from my checking to my savings, and let it go. And allow that $25 to continue to grow and save until you're at a point where you're ready to take it and invest it, right? That's a really easy way to start getting your savings, because like a lot of us, once the money hits our account, we have a tendency to spend it. And it's really hard to save. So creating that second bucket and doing it automatically is really helpful. Here's another way to look at it. If I was 25 years old and I wanted $1 million by the time I'm 65, now remember, $1 million won't buy you what $1 million today will buy you, right? So we really have to make sure our money is growing and working because of inflation. Today the iPhone costs $1,000. 5 years from now, it might cost $1,500. So if our money is not growing with us, right, we know that the price of goods are going to continue to rise over time. And that's what's called the silent killer, that inflation.
Jordan, there are a bunch of questions, but while we're on this topic, someone asked that number of 7%. Where do you put your money for that 7% annual return?
Okay. So I'm going to talk about that in about 5 minutes, because I'm going to pop it on here. If I were a beginning investor and I was starting to look at putting some of my capital to work, I personally, with some of the low cost, advantages that they offer, the diversification that they provide, something like the S&P 500, for example, ticker SPY, ticker VOO. These are essentially your indexed, securities, which will basically allow you to be part of United States business. And those are your top 500 companies. That's a very good way to start as a beginning investor, right? Just be part of the long-term growth of the United States. I would not get into the business of picking stocks and trying to pick one stock here or one stock there. Why? Because once you start picking stocks, you're increasing your risk because you're concentrating yourself in that one position. So the best way to do it, if I were you, as a beginning investor, is go into the low-cost options, and you can go on E-Trade, you can go on Schwab, you can go on Robinhood, open up your account, start to research what you're looking at, read about it, educate yourself, and start to put your money in with the idea that you're going to be investing for a long time. Now, as you grow your portfolio, as more cash flows comes in, as your career starts to take off, what we do is we start diversifying from that. Then we might take, other positions, and start to, evaluate where we believe, we might be better suited for the long term also. But that's a great way to start if I were you. And again, the historical return of an S&P 500 is close to 10%, right? Now, given a specific year, that doesn't mean it's going to go up 10% each year, right? 2019, it was over 20%. 2020, it's flat year to date. At the end of March 23rd, which was our low, and the market was down over 34%. So that's why you got to have a long-term approach, because you never know, when something will hit. But if you diversify yourself, that's a great way to do it. And what this is showing you essentially is, at 25 years old, $380 monthly savings at 7% will get you to, your million versus when you're 55 years old, you got to put away $5,778 to get you to your million. So I can promise you this. One day you're going to be older. One day you're going to be sitting around and you're going to say, I don't want to work anymore. I want to chill. I want to just do my hobbies and relax. But there are many Americans out there today that don't have the luxury of retiring because they didn't do all the right steps that they could have done in the beginning, or they made some financial mistakes later on. So that's why I'm trying to spend my time today educating and talking about some things that I would do and consider if I were you to get yourself ahead of the ball. Because you will be older one day and you will want to retire one day. So at some point in time, you're going to have to face the music and know that you have set aside funds for a later time. Now, this is what, something that compounding is talking about when your money essentially is making money for yourself. Would you rather be given $1 million today or 1 penny that doubled every day for the next 30 days? What would you prefer? Well, if you knew the math, the answer would be the penny. And that's, my way of talking about compounding returns, right? Once your money is making money for you, then that money is making money for you, and so on and so on and so on. And that's why the market allows you to compound over time. Because as those rates, and balances continue to rise, then that money continues to go up and rise. Okay? So this is what a 1 penny compounding return does over time. You can see through the first 5 days you're at $5. Through the first 20 days you're at $5,000. Then through the next 30 days you're at over $5 million. Right? So being part of companies that are paying you dividends and are earnings and are making money with your money, that's how you ultimately grow. And this is the example of the S&P 500, where the ultra weightings of the index itself is in technology, healthcare. You can see consumer services, right? And as a young person, I would say, look at the transition and where this economy is moving. I think everybody on this call has a real opportunity to take advantage of the future. We spend a lot of time talking to different businesses and seeing and analyzing their financial statements and looking at their financial plans and figuring out where they're putting their capital, where are they hiring, where are they doubling down? And you're seeing the two themes in this environment is going to be e-commerce, right? And is going to be, the cloud and digitalization of business. If I were a young person and I was looking at careers and looking at questions to ask my future employer, what strategies are they putting in place to make sure that there's a digital, workplace environment that we can all take advantage of? Because I think that's where the shift is happening. Even if a vaccine comes out tomorrow, I think the country has learned how important it is that we have the technologies in place to be able to maybe not have to drive to the office anymore. So keep that in mind.
So if you think about that, so I guess another thing that I would recommend to people is that they always take a long-term point of view. And I think this is something about which there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of people, and I'm just not one of them, believe that you should live for the now. I think what you do is you think about the great expanse of time ahead of you and try to make sure that you're planning for that in a way that's going to leave you ultimately satisfied. So this is the way it works for me. Everybody needs to find that for themselves. So I think there are a lot of paths to satisfaction, and you need to find one that works for you.
So if you know, that's Jeff Bezos of Amazon, the richest man in the world. And, you know, whether it's Bezos, whether it's Steve Jobs, whether it's Elon Musk, they all set their sights on what they, you know, in their hearts wanted to do, tried different things, failed at many things, but ultimately let their passions take over their, you know, their careers and put themselves in a very, you know, successful position. So I think you have to look at that and look inside yourself to see, what are you really passionate about? What are you really trying to, you know, bring to the world, bring to the marketplace? You know, that's where you're going to bring your best. You know, and if the answer is, I don't know, Jordan, I don't know what I'm passionate about, my answer would be, then you got to try new things. You know, what groups have you joined to learn about? What books are you reading? What mentors do you have? You know, what internships have you done? You know, you got to put yourself out there and sometimes be uncomfortable in that environment in order to figure out, well, I know I don't like this. And that's a win, right? Some things that you learned about yourself. You know, for me personally, you know, it's about family. It's about loving yourself, making sure that you value yourself. You're putting yourself in a position to succeed. You know, you have to care for yourself and love yourself in order to love anybody else. You know, learning from this experience. This is an amazing experience that we're all living through, something that we're all going to talk to our future generations about. You know, this COVID and how and what we did and how and what we persevered and overcame. You know, remind yourself of that. You know, so overall, diversification will reduce your risk, and that's when, you know, looking at something like the S&P 500 as a beginning investor is a good step, because it's diversified in all the holdings that it has. You know, the short term, there's always going to be headwinds that are going to be facing, whether it's the presidency elections, whether it's COVID, whether it's, you know, wars, whether it's, you know, China relations, whatever it is. But if you have a long-term approach and you give yourself some sort of strategy and you set yourself up for success, you're gonna be very happy later down the road. When investing, time is more important than timing. One of the biggest advantages everybody on this call has is that they have time on their side because they're young. So you'll be able to really make, you know, and take advantage of that. I love this quote. You will never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. Right? A U-Haul being that big truck that we pack our shit in. The hearse being what we put ourselves in when our days are no longer around. I don't care how rich you are, how much stuff you have, you can't take it with you, guys. What you're ultimately going to remember and the legacy you're going to leave behind, you know, is how you're improving yourself, how you're loving your family, how you're loving the community, you know, what kind of citizen and human being you are to the world. That's what really matters, you know? And, you know, I think it's important just to remember that and ask yourself, what will you do with the time you have today moving forward? You know, one of my mentors reminded me that it's two sides of the fence. It's fear and courage. You know, it's as simple as that. You can live in fear and always wait for the next bad thing to happen and never take those chances. Or you can live with courage and put yourself out there and try to see what works and what doesn't work. Don't be afraid to take chances in life and try new things. So that's ultimately how you're going to be successful. He who says he can and he who says he can't are usually right. Just remember that. If you have a positive outlook and you keep pressing and chipping away at it, chances are you're going to get to where you want to go. If you don't think you will, I'm almost positive you won't. And finally, just to wrap up, I love this, and I don't know, I saw this the other day. I wanted to share it with you. It's called the 9 dots. And the the testers wanted to see, by making 4 lines without picking up your pen, can you do it? By touching all of the dots here. So most people, they go 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that doesn't work, right? Because that's there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that doesn't work. But the answer to this is really cool. I hope I don't mess it up. And it's really an analogy for our life and for where we all want to go. Oop, was that me? Was that John? So it's 1, outside the box, 2, 3, 4. And what the motivator was talking about was sometimes you got to get outside the box in life. Sometimes you got to stretch yourself out to get to the goals and the objectives, successes of where you want to get and be. And I'll tell you, for a long time, I was very self-conscious and unsure about, what I wanted to do with my life, and try to figure it out. And I realized that over time, the more chances I took, the more times I was uncomfortable, that's when I was really learning and becoming my best self. So we'll wrap it up with that. Ultimately, thank you for allowing me to talk to you guys. It's definitely a crazy time that we're all in right now. But I think if we continue to keep a positive attitude, continue to, stay healthy, continue to work hard, learn new things, and keep ourselves in really good financial positioning, by the time we, graduate, by the time we go on to our first job, maybe our second job, maybe our third job, every chapter you're getting better, you're learning different things. I mean, I was never comfortable getting on a Zoom and talking to people I never knew, and I had to force myself and put myself into that environment to grow. And that's why I'm really happy about doing it, So if you have any questions, you guys let me know. I wish everybody success, and I hope this was helpful and informative. If you have any questions, just please let me know.
We have we're probably like 3-4 minutes left. We do some like rapid fire, where you just ask and you answer. All right. Somebody asked about a savings account. Does it matter which bank? Is there a better savings account than others?
No, we are living in, an interest rate environment which is 0 right now, right? You're not going to be making money, leaving your money in savings, but the idea is, to get yourself organized and to give yourself, a chance to start building your buckets. Remember going back to our 4 buckets? And that's ultimately, studies will show that if you just do it and you just put some money there every month, you're going to adjust to your new normal, to your new, checking account figures, for example. So it doesn't matter, try to create some automatic savings program for yourself, and I think you'll be happy that you did.
All right. Is it good to have more than one credit card?
I don't know.
How much of a credit limit should we spend?
No, I have 1 credit card. If you show that your credit, for the majority of folks, if you continue to pay your credit, they're going to increase your credit line. So you won't need to have multiple cards. I think that's where you get in trouble. Stick to 1 card, pay off your monthly bills, and take the additional savings and start building your investment accounts over time, because that's where you're going to be earning money, not spending money.
And should you spend your whole limit, or should you leave some, or how much of your limit should you spend?
Well, again, it depends on what your expenses are, right?
Yeah.
Creating a budget and understanding how much do I need for rent, how much do I need for food, how much do I need for insurance, right? And ultimately that should guide you as to the money coming in versus the money coming out and what's there extra. So no, definitely, you know, a lot of times they're going to give you a limit that, you know, may be higher than you actually need. So just because they're giving you a limit doesn't mean that you have to spend to that limit. Spend within your means, understanding how much you're earning and ultimately what you need versus what you want.
Got it. Is a Roth IRA better than a 401k?
Well, for younger people, you know, the advantage with the Roth, and again, just talking about the differences between the traditional and the Roth, with the traditional, you are getting the tax benefit breaks today, right? So let's do it. Let's do an example. Let's say you make $50,000 a year, right? You don't have a company that contributes to a 401k, right? So you're on your own. If you put $5,000 into a traditional IRA, now you're telling the government, instead of you making $50,000, you're telling the government you made $45,000, right? So you are saving $5,000 and tucking that away in a tax, what they call a tax deferred account. We are not paying taxes on that money. We're letting that money grow over time. And when we're ready to pull the money out, when we're 59 and a half years old, at whatever tax bracket will be, we'll pull the money out and we'll be taxed at that time, right? So if you're looking at a $5,000 IRA invested at 7% over 30 years, that's going to be a significant amount of money, right? Now with the Roth, it's a little different. The Roth is you're contributing your money today, and your money grows over time, but you don't get the tax benefit today. So if you made $50,000, you're telling the government you made $50,000. You don't get that $5,000 break in our example. So for younger people that have lower tax brackets, right, and that they know their money's going to be in the market over a long period of time, when they pull their money out, you don't have to pay the tax on that money in the Roth. So here's my answer. My answer is do both. I personally think there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of some of the tax breaks, right? Reduce some of your taxes today. If you want to lean more on the Roth, that's okay too. The fact is you're winning in both scenarios, in my opinion. You're starting to save for your retirement. There are caps on how much you can put into a Roth, but overall, I think both scenarios are very good. If I was a younger person, I would consider, both options. And if you wanted to even split 1,000 here, 1,000 there, or whatever, you could do that.
Last question here. And then I think, you have your number and email there. I'm sure you're happy to take questions later if people can reach out to you. But someone said at the end here, how do you assess risk as far as investment goes?
Right. So that's a great question. And that's, always going to be at the heart of, who you are as an investor and, ultimately how you manage yourself during good times and, more importantly, bad times. Now, traditionally, younger people will lean on equities or stocks, right? A diversified stock portfolio, which historically has more deviation, has more risk, right? And risk is just the variability of the expected outcome, right? So if you're swinging up and down like this, that's what we're calling risk, right? How much risk are we taking in order to achieve our expected outcome? But typically younger people, right, when they're in their 20s, when they're in their 30s, when they're in their 40s, are typically going to lean more on the diversified stock options because there's more returns. And even though there may be more embedded risk in them, right, we know that we have a long time horizon, so we don't have to sell, right? We don't have to sell. Just because on paper, COVID-19 happened and the market was down 30%, as long as you didn't sell your position, the market recovered right now through the first 2 quarters, back to even. So that's where your growth is going to be. In this environment, as we get older, what we start to do is we start to peel back some of that risk and start to tuck away more conservative investments, like I spoke to you about our bonds, right? And some of our cash, to make sure that if the market, goes up and down, we're not part of that volatility. So what I would say is, again, as young people, and the majority of the individuals are on this call are under 60, I would say leaning towards equities stocks are going to bring you the best returns, the best outcomes, but you have to be understanding that you gotta let the money continue and the capital continue to appreciate and go as you grow older. If you're somebody who needs the money in 6 months to a year, then you're not ready to invest in the market per se, because we don't know what's going to happen in 6 months. But if you're somebody who's trying to, put yourself in the best position for your future, and you have the horizon to let your money grow, stocks are going to be your best bet. Now, as you get older, I have retirees, they can't put 100% of their money in equities, right? Because it's too much risk for them. They may be balanced. They may be 50-50. They may be 40-60. They start to peel it back over time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jordan. Ivy, I don't know, do you have any final words there? I want to say for everyone, our Hillel programming, you can find out on social media at FIU Hillel on Instagram, and Hillel at FIU on Facebook.
Yes,
thank you.
John.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys very much for spending time with me today. Again, I just want to reiterate, I'm rooting for everyone here. I know you can do it. There's a lot of challenges out there for all of us. But the more time you put into yourself and prepare yourself financially with all the right steps and tools that we spoke about, you're going to be really happy later on. It's going to work out much in your favor. So I hope what we discussed today was helpful. And again, if there's any questions, I'm here for you. Just shoot me an email and I'll help you answer those questions. Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Jordan, for your time and advice and insight. And thank you, John, as well with Hillel. We'll have another one coming up soon on the 23rd for community service outreach virtually. So look out for that. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, guys.